Yuka was the man who had been awakened by the alarm clock. He accidentally entered his sister's room and confused the two of them. Yu's father made the announcement that Mitsuki and her brother will move into their house starting that day during the meal. Suddenly, he received important work that required a 6-month journey. In the hopes that she would be able to rely on Yu while he is abroad, Yu's father introduced him to Mitsuki. Standing up, Mitsuki requested permission to leave for school. Yu went after Mitsuki, who went first. Today, Mitsuki was also attending the new school to learn. Yu told his peers about his incident since he was curious about his new sister. Yu was still observing Mitsuki as she was seated in class. He called her back to apologize just before it was time for them to leave. Yu received a reply from Mitsuki as well before she left. Yu hurried after his sister in an effort to talk to Mitsuki, while keeping in mind his father's orders. As she approached the bridge, Mitsuki abruptly swooned. Yu hastily carried her to the hospital. Yu went to see Mitsuki after getting the results. Upon awakening, Mitsuki noticed her brother was making an effort to assist. Mitsuki felt a pounding in her chest. Yu was about to go grab some water when Mitsuki stopped him. Yu was shocked when Mitsuki abruptly approached him and gave him a hug. She then gave him a fly-out kick. Even though Mitsuki's mother would always remind her not to show respect to Yu on their way home, she didn't listen. Mitsuki walked straight to her room after getting home, but when her mother knocked, Mitsuki didn't answer. When her mother handed Mitsuki to Yu and went to see Nanami, Yu went to check the issue as well. Yu departed later as well, in order to get food at the grocery. After pondering her activities at the hospital, Mitsuki dozed off while lying in bed. In a dream, she encountered a young child on the bridge who had wings. The child charged directly at Mitsuki, knocking her to the ground. When Mitsuki awoke, she was still unsure of what that meant. Mitsuki became aware of something in her tummy. When she opened the curtains and turned on the lights, she let her skirt fall and observed a strange thing. A voice was emanating. Mitsuki screamed when the little girl in the afternoon identified herself as Hiyori. It revealed that she was a ghost. In order to play with Mitsuki's body, Hiyori forced her soul from her body. Hiyori continued to make fun of Mitsuki even after she had her body back. Mitsuki gave in and lay back, having a good time. Mitsuki began interrogating Hiyori about a peculiar item she was wearing once everything was finished. Mitsuki requested that Hiyori take it out. Hiyori excitedly pointed out the fact, but Mitsuki had already done it without waiting for Hiyori. The moment Mitsuki sat down in the restroom after descending the stairs, the belt tightened. At that point, Hiyori teasingly laughed at Mitsuki as she tried again, but was unsuccessful. It only opened for a short period of time each time, 3 minutes, and then closed for an hour. Nako was strolling when Yu encountered her on the way home. He offered to pick her up, but she declined. When Mitsuki's mother arrived home, she overheard Mitsuki in the restroom. She urged her to leave right now because she needed to tell Mitsuki something concerning Nanami. Yu was also knocking on the door of the bathroom. Mitsuki was immobile. Upon spotting Yu, Hiyori's eyes glowed. She dug deep inside herself to feel Mitsuki's suffering. Mitsuki began to perspire with barely 20 seconds remaining and felt the greatest level of comfort. Episode 2. Hiyori was having ice cream while Mitsuki was unsuccessfully attempting to unbuckle her belt. Hiyori only left once. Mitsuki was finished. Despite her request for her to remain away from her, in a dimly lit area, Mitsuki and Hiyori were standing on 2 steps when Hiyori led the way for Mitsuki. A gateway to heaven could be seen in the distance in front of her. A truck, according to Hiyori, struck her. Hiyori passed away before telling Yu that she liked him. Mitsuki must satisfy her love for Yu in order to fulfill her obligation to aid Hiyori. Each time this happened, an additional ladder would be created. Otherwise, Mitsuki would not have unbuckled her virgin belt and would have to live with it for the rest of her life. Yu thought it was simply a dream. When she woke up, it wasn't. The Yu family had breakfast together. At 4 p.m., Mitsuki's mother would depart on a professional trip. As soon as Mitsuki finished her meal, she headed to school. Yu left for school as well after breakfast. Yu and Mitsuki classes both studied physical education during the first class. Since she didn't want her classmates to see the belts, Mitsuki had to change clothes in the restroom while the classmates changed in the locker room. When Mitsuki and her companions had changed, they went to the gym, ran downstairs, and met Yu. Yu was ignored as Yuki fled. Hiyori entered Mitsuki and raced to the finish line swiftly. which made Mitsuki despise gymnastics because she was so sluggish. Hiyori warned Mitsuki that if she didn't act, the belt would fall and she would perish. Everyone noticed Mitsuki because she ran the quickest in her class. Mitsuki needed to use the restroom but was too shy. In place of Mitsuki, Hiyori asked the teacher. Yu followed and questioned Mitsuki as she was led inside the hospital out of worry. When Mitsuki attempts to control her emotions failed, she relieved herself next to a potted plant in the hospital. Yu and the nurse entered at that precise moment. Even though the nurse swore not to tell anyone, Mitsuki was humiliated to return home. Mitsuki ran to Aunt Nanami on the way, and then she drove her niece home. Both of them confided in Yu in his new home. When Mitsuki got home, she heard a disturbance coming from the bathroom. She went to investigate and found Yu. Yu called Mitsuki for a meal after she had finished preparing. Yet Mitsuki ate later, leaving Yu to eat by himself. When Mitsuki's buddy called to ask how she was, she responded that she was fine. Mitsuki persisted on spending time alone in her room. After a while, Mitsuki went to take a shower. Hiyori and Mitsuki discussed about Yu while in the restroom. In spite of Mitsuki's shyness, Hiyori provided her a small amount of relief for her sexual urge in the restroom. After taking a shower, Mitsuki discovered that the door's lock had been broken, trapping her inside. Yu hurried to aid when he heard that Mitsuki was stuck. Hiyori had an idea for a joke and laughed menacingly. Hiyori walked in and unrolled the towel and dragged Mitsuki into the bathroom as Yu opened the door. Once more entering, Mitsuki dove into the bathtub. They were both confined to the restroom as a result. They confide in their family. Episode 3. Yu attempted to open the restroom door, but it was unsuccessful. Mitsuki became alarmed when he removed his shirt. For fear that she would pass out if she remained in the water for too long, Yu handed Mitsuki his shirt. They moved away from one another without uttering a word as Mitsuki put on Yu's shirt. Mitsuki realized that this was the first time she had spent this much time with Yu. Since the family had no daughters to date, Yu first apologized because he wasn't sure how to respond. The moment Mitsuki's mother arrived here, Yu admitted he was quite overjoyed. The fact that her last name had been changed completely displeased Mitsuki. Her father was nothing more than a drug addict. Yu turned around, pledging never to leave Mitsuki and her mother behind. Yu raised his head in need of assistance as the doorbell rang. For the sake of keeping her room from being seen, Mitsuki stopped him. Just as her sister Yuki opened the door, Mitsuki tripped and fell into Yu's body. She greeted Mitsuki, but all Mitsuki did was keep staring at Yuki's chest. Mitsuki still had vivid memories of the following morning as she sat in the class. Up until then, she had been unconcerned. Regardless of what her companion stated, Mitsuki remained silent. Suddenly, Yuki and Yu appeared in front of the house. Yuki cheerfully greeted Mitsuki. However, Mitsuki gave no response. While Mitsuki made the phone call, Yuki was brewing tea. Yu apologized to her and made an effort to explain, but Mitsuki wasn't interested. Yuki pulled out the package of cakes, which Mitsuki enjoyed, so she requested if she may first wash her hands. Hiyori started speaking while still standing in the restroom. She requested that Mitsuki attack Yu. Hiyori indicated that Mitsuki was concerned by pulling her skirt over the colored mana. Mitsuki would perish collectively if this bar fell, shuddering Mitsuki. Yuki and Yu sat down to enjoy the cake. Much to Yu's dismay, Mitsuki developed a more vibrant personality from the inside out, and it came out that Mitsuki was letting Hiyori in. Hiyori looked over to Mitsuki to see how she had embarrassed Yuki. She took up the cake and purposely poured it all over Yuki. Not furious, but provocative was Yuki's attitude. Hiyori inquired about Yu's preference for big or small breasts because she didn't feel right. Yu opted for a cautious response, much to Hiyori's delight. The mana bar once more increased. The following morning, Nanami was intoxicated when Mitsuki left the house to grab the newspaper. She led Nanami into the house and went to grab some water. Mitsuki was embarrassed when Yu rolled his eyes at her pantsu. As she entered the changing room, Hiyori complained that Mitsuki's pantsu lacked any charm. The doorbell rang out of the blue. Yuki requested that Mitsuki accompany her to school, but she declined. Mitsuki turned around and ignored Hiyori's struggles, since she was focused on herself. Tori was envious of Yu. Tori had a crush on Mitsuki. He thought Mitsuki's dress would blow up because it was so windy that day. When Mitsuki realized that she had left her pantsu at home, she became pale. When Mitsuki and her buddy went looking for a spot to eat lunch, Mitsuki requested to stay indoors because the wind was too fierce outside. When she encountered Yu, Mitsuki was going to return to class as her friend hurried to buy water. Mitsuki was asked to explain her reasons for being furious as he held her hand. Yuki scowled at Yu before advancing to caution Mitsuki. Yu stepped back and fell headfirst against the wall as the wind quickened Mitsuki's skirt at that very time. Neko departed after setting a bag on Mitsuki's desk. Mitsuki also appeared weird. When Yu woke up in the hospital, it seemed like he was unaware of what had recently occurred. Episode 4. Mitsuki reflected on all that had just happened. Mitsuki didn't answer when Yu called her down for dinner. Nanami went in after, opening the door, and Yu extended an invitation to dine. She agreed right away and declared her desire to live here. Yu set the meal in front of Mitsuki's door. As Hiyori looked reproachfully and dejectedly at Mitsuki, the latter bent over in laughter as a result of Hiyori's tickling her underarm. Hiyori then advised Mitsuki to be a cute sister. The phone rang the following morning, waking Yu. His father called to find out how things were going for the family. He warned Yu not to harm Mitsuki because she was a family member. Yu gave a short yawn, cleaned his teeth, and then headed downstairs to the kitchen. The food was being enthusiastically prepared inside by Mitsuki. She prepared a hearty breakfast for him. It found apparent that Mitsuki had been replaced by Hiyori in Mitsuki's body, who appeared different from her typical hard personality. Hiyori remarked that she wished Yu would show her how to cook beef. The two of them then proceeded to the grocery, Hiyori clutching Yu's hand, much to Mitsuki's displeasure. Together, they went shopping at the grocery store, and while there, Hiyori came up with some recipes that made Yu smile. Mitsuki understood that he was just like any other person after seeing Yu grin. When Yuki spotted them, he went to where they were. Hiyori moved closer to Yu to signify the sovereignty when she observed Yuki approaching Yu. Yuki simply said hello before turning to leave. As she continued to gaze from above, a voice abruptly warned Mitsuki not to drift apart for too long. Neko ventured outside to get an ice cream. Yu and Hiyori played in the stream. As Yu watched Hiyori hurl the stones, he saw how much of this scene reminded him of his childhood. He used to be referred as Oni by the young girl who lived next door. When Hiyori heard that, she jumped into Yu's lap right away. Mitsuki was embarrassed and wanted to rejoin, but was unable to once she recognized herself as that little girl. Mitsuki's body made Hiyori very delighted. Mitsuki nevertheless maintained a distressed appearance. Yu was browsing internet documents regarding the two personalities while sitting in his room. Hiyori was informed by Mitsuki that she couldn't enter the body again when it was pouring down heavily. Hiyori grinned, thinking that if no one stood in her path, she could ascend to paradise. Yu sat and read without understanding he was reading after Hiyori had already fled. Yu heard a sudden fall, and when he opened the door, his sister Mitsuki was seated there. Hiyori cited her desire to sleep with him as a result of her fear of thunder. Yu agreed that Hiyori would get the bed while he would lie on the ground. Hiyori grinned, satisfied that she has made the initial move. Mitsuki made an effort to stop it, but was unsuccessful. Yu, who was lying there and was having trouble falling asleep, suddenly noticed a hand behind him. Despite Yu's best efforts to calm his fears, Hiyori collapsed, wailing that she couldn't let go of him. Mitsuki gave Yu a firm hug while doing her absolute best. She felt like a waste. Yu snarled at Mitsuki's forehead, telling her not to try to be his sister out of obligation. Hiyori sat up, tears streaming down her face, and she flayed the skin. Mitsuki awoke dreamily after Hiyori kicked her back into her body, and she discovered Yu listening to her heartbeat. Then Yu had to spend the night on the sofa because she kicked him out. The following morning, after the rain had ceased, Yu awoke and opened the curtains. Last night, he couldn't sleep, and when he went to the bathroom, he ran to Mitsuki. She returned motionless, and Mitsuki stated that she would remain so. Episode 5. When Hiyori continued to press, Mitsuki was getting dressed. Hiyori complained and wished Mitsuki had more guts. Mitsuki screamed after Hiyori accidentally dropped her underwear. Despite the fact that the pool was already busy, Hiyori tried to ask Mitsuki when she emerged from the changing room. The invitation Ayaka extended to Mitsuki made her delighted. Yuki noticed her. Concerned about that senior, Hiyori was on high alert. The group of Yu followed Yuki after she claimed to have won the jackpot. Neko and Mitsuki relaxed on the shore while they enjoyed themselves at the pool. In response to Neko's question, Mitsuki asked Neko why she hadn't gone swimming. She responded that her father owned the pool, and she then invited her friends to come over to survey. Hiyori slammed the table, telling Mitsuki that she had a chance to seduce Yu. Still, Mitsuki didn't want to fall for fear for showing the belt. In a rage, Hiyori attempted to enter the corpse, but she was unable. The young girl behind him, who turned out to be Tori's sister, was playing when he ran into her. The younger sister exited the pool because she didn't want to swim in the same pool as her brother. After that, they kept playing volleyball as Yu cast a quick glance Mitsuki's way. He was unable to dodge Yuki because of his diversion, and the two fell into the pool. Unconcerned, Mitsuki stepped forward. When Yu and Yuki saw Mitsuki, they swam up. Yu hurriedly transported Yuki to the hospital since it appeared that she had sustained an injury. Neko noticed that Mitsuki's swim trunks had fallen. Mitsuki fell on the ground and Yu saw her odd belt by accident. Mitsuki flushed and couldn't speak. Yu pulled out his torso and shielded Mitsuki when someone unexpectedly approached. Fearing that they might see her, Yu gave Mitsuki his swimming trunks after they departed so that she could wear them. With her brother's swim trunks in hand, Mitsuki turned to face Ayaka. That evening, Hiyori was content that she had constructed so many more ladders. When Yu spotted the belt, though, Mitsuki became anxious. The following morning, Yuki went to set down a bag as Yu was envisioning some hot scenarios. When Yu opened it, he found the swimsuit Mitsuki had left behind the day before. Mitsuki was ill, so Yuki gave it to Yu instead, after returning it to her as she had intended. Mitsuki came to mind as Yu picked up his slacks, as he was unable to distinguish between her two personalities. Remembering the belt, Yu believed that Mitsuki were to allow him to see. Yu lost himself in his thoughts, wiping the sweat from his forehead as he continued to clutch Mitsuki's trunks. Neko reminded him of this. At home, Mitsuki continued to worry about this, but Hiyori seemed upbeat. Hiyori received a harsh reprimand from Mitsuki for doing little to assist. After school, Yu went to the store to get some supplies, and Mitsuki used scissors at home to cut the belt. Hiyori tried to stop her, which made her extra angrier. Mitsuki believed that by taking off the belt, her life would return to normal. Hiyori felt upset and has no other options because it was all her fault. Then Hiyori quickly checked on Mitsuki after she abruptly started to fall apart. Both Mitsuki's body and mana were getting weaker. Yu brought some food for Mitsuki, and as soon as he heard a cry for assistance, he entered the room. When Mitsuki held him to the ground, she hastily checked. Despite the fact that Hiyori had invaded Mitsuki's body, the picture of Hiyori gradually arose in Yu's eyes. Episode 6. Hiyori had Yu pinned down, and Yu wasn't sure what was happening. Likewise, Yu had no idea who Hiyori was. Suddenly, Hiyori put her palm over his eyes. Instead of Hiyori, Mitsuki was there when he opened his eyes. As Mitsuki hurled his pillow and backed away, he was still confused about what was happening. After claiming that she wasn't the one who was doing it, Mitsuki passed out. Yu dashed over and spotted Mitsuki with a high fever. Yu then received a bare embrace from Mitsuki, who was mistakenly believed he was her mother. Yu escorted Mitsuki to her bedside and urged her to take her medication. Even though Mitsuki's temperature had decreased the previous morning, she was still required to stay home. The color of the belt has likewise changed back to its previous state. Because of how enamored they had been with one another yesterday, Hiyori grinned. Mitsuki lied down and paid no attention to what Hiyori said. Mitsuki was incensed that Yu would consider her to be a pervert. For concern that Mitsuki would give up before entering paradise, Hiyori allowed Mitsuki to sleep. After Hiyori passed away, a voice like that of a deity sounded and granted her one more chance. Yukina and Yu were buying cakes for Mitsuki. Yukina picked up the cake for Mitsuki because Yu was unsure of her preferences. They both returned home after buying it. Yu was curious as to whether one's surroundings could affect their personality. Yu used Yukina's situation as an illustration. Yukina had undergone a radical shift after migrating. Yukina had then asked Yu if he preferred her previous personality, but he responded negatively. Yu cited another acquaintance as an example, who used to laugh a lot before becoming solemn. Yukina retorted that it was not likely brought on by circumstances, making new friends, or falling in love. Although it had nothing to do with Pantsu, Yu began to consider Mitsuki. Believing that he was the root of the problem, he pictured Mitsuki's mother as the one who had worn that for her daughter. It couldn't have been Kyoko who forced her to wear it in order to preserve her virginity. Hiyori, who occasionally showed up, crossed his mind. He believed Mitsuki wore that pantsu in a lusty manner because she liked girls. Thoughts were running through his head as he walked around. and before he knew it, he had reached his house. After saying goodbye to Yukina, he went inside. Hiyori had Mitsuki under her control. She approached Yu and gave him a bear hug. Only after they had both finished taking showers did Mitsuki want to converse. Yu went to the bathroom first, followed by Mitsuki. Hiyori had gone to the restroom. While Yu waited for Mitsuki in his room, he speculated about what Mitsuki would say. As Hiyori absorbed Mitsuki, the latter approached. They both sat down on Yu's bed. Yu sat next to Hiyori, who seemed hesitantly friendly, and talked cordially. Hiyori acted the same way that Mitsuki did. She wanted Yu to spoil her, but she was so tense that she was unable to talk. Hiyori made an attempt at seducing Yu by unbuttoning her top. However, Yu helped her after she slipped. Yu encouraged Mitsuki to return to her room and recover. Mitsuki so arrived at a crucial juncture, because Hiyori felt nervous. She allowed Mitsuki to re-enter the body. Mitsuki felt humiliated as well. Yu admitted to Mitsuki that he had no rights to limit Mitsuki's actions. He backed Mitsuki in everything. Yuki likewise misread Hiyori, believing Mitsuki liked her, and thinking Hiyori was just a girl who enjoyed cosplaying angels. After some time, the two reconciled. Mitsuki was kinder to Yu. Mitsuki returned to school as usual the next morning. She also consumed the cake Yu had bought for her.